After the US and Europe launched the ultimate sanctions against Russia, the Russian central bank responded by announcing the use of rubles to buy gold, as well as rubles to buy crude oil, etc. The ruble exchange rate, once derided as worthless by the US President Joe Biden, rose back to where it was at the start of the war. This woman's great wisdom is as important as Putin's. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a special military operation against Ukraine. Shocking and unexpected, Russian-Ukrainian war began. The United States and its European allies retaliated and began to impose sanctions on Russia. The endless sanctions caused the ruble's exchange rate to fall from 75 to around 132. US President Joe Biden mocked the collapsing exchange rate that led to the ruble to rubble. The Russian stock market plummeted, markets could not open for trade, and the government bond market was in a crisis. The Russian financial markets crashed. Western financial institutions were waiting excitedly for Russian market to dip lower and planning to buy at the best price. They planned to repeat the history and made a fortune by buying cheap, just like what they did when the Soviet Union collapsed. But little did they know they would fail this time. Nabiullina, backed by Putin, fought back by announcing that the ruble would be pegged to crude oil and that all countries would only be able to buy crude oil and natural gas in rubles. The ruble's exchange rate rose in response. After this miracle worked, Nabiullina announced the implementation of a temporary fixed ruble gold trading system with 5,000 rubles to a gram of gold and commodities being settled in rubles only, creating the first substantial gold standard situation since 1944. To curb domestic inflation, she stopped the rise of the ruble by lowering interest rates. Regarding the easing of the market pressure caused by the domestic unemployment boom, she directly announced that no royalties would be paid to the West. In order to keep Russia's domestic state assets from flowing out, Russia announced a retreat from overseas stock markets. Russia also intends to replicate the ruble order for the most popular commodities currently available, including crude oil, grain, timber, fertilizer, and other resources. Through these specific moves, the sanctions were successfully diffused and the ruble's exchange rate returned to near 77 points. Sanctions by Biden and Western financial institutions were successfully curbed. Nabiullina is fluent in English and French, loves classical music, poetry, and drama. Her favorite authors are Leo Tolstoy and Pushkin. A typical native economist with no experience of studying in Europe or America. Elvira Nabiullina's mentor said of her, "She doesn't like to talk, she doesn't like to lead lectures, but when necessary does a good job." In addition to being very capable, she's a very beautiful, attractive woman, modest and self-controlled, but for whom men are always enchanted. The war between Russia and Ukraine continues, and the disturbances to the global economy are intensifying, with the IMF already downgrading global growth accordingly. The US and Western allies are still working on a fifth round of sanctions against Russia. However, the sanctions are now like an arrow at the end of its flight, and Governor Nabiullina, Putin's most trusted former aide, is a key player in the financial war between Russia and the West. She and the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Zakharova are two of the key women behind Putin.